Welcome to argument paper number six, illegal drug usage. Today we'll be talking about Act 5 in Romeo and Juliet. Number 1. How does Romeo react when he hears about Juliet being dead in Capulet's tomb? Number 2. Do you think the anger Romeo feels at hearing the death of Juliet is rational? Number 3. In your opinion, do you believe Romeo made the right decision to buy illegal poison on his way to see Juliet in the tomb? Last but not least, number 4, what should be done to people who purchase and use illegal drugs for recreational or harmful use? The key being illegal drugs. Now, this excerpt was taken from Act 4, Scene 1, lines 34 to 86. Scene 1, Mantua, a street. Exit Balthazar. So real quickly, Balthazar was there and he tells Romeo that Juliet is dead. He saw her in the tomb. So what's Romeo's response? Well, Juliet, I will lie with thee tonight. Let's see for means. O mischief, thou art swift to enter in the thoughts of desperate men. So Romeo here is blaming mischief for his actions. I do remember an apothecary, and hereabouts dwells, which late I noted, in tattered weeds with overwhelming brows, colon of simple. So real quickly, an apothecary is basically an old-fashioned drug dealer, okay? Meager were his looks, sharp misery had worn him to the bones, and in his needy shop a tortoise hung, an alligator stuffed and other skins of ill-shaped fishes, and about his shelves a beggarly account of empty boxes, green earthen pots, bladders and musty seeds, remnants of pack thread and old cakes of roses, were thinly scattered to make up a show. Now, real quickly, he's describing this apothecary. So this drug dealer, he's describing his home, basically, where he lives, and basically he's describing like this old, raggedy, kind of dusty, old place. He says, noting his penury, which means his poverty, to myself I said, and if a man did need a poison now whose cell is present death in Mantua, here lives a caitiff wretch would sell it him. So the caitiff means a cowardly wretch. So pretty much a guy down on his luck, he would sell him some drugs. So he says it's poison. And if a man did need a poison now whose cell is present death in Mantua. So essentially what Romeo's saying is he's going to go to this guy who's all poor, right? And this poor apothecary, because he's so poor, is going to sell him drugs, this poison. But that poison, if you sell it, it's death. So if you're a drug dealer selling these illegal drugs, the law says you're going to be put to death for selling them. But Romeo realizes this guy is so poor that he's going to be willing to sell so he can make some money. So then he says, oh, this same thought did forerun my need. And this same needy man must sell it to me. As I remember, this should be the house. Being holiday, the beggar's shop is shut. What? Ho, apothecary. Enter apothecary. Who calls so loud? Come hither, man. I see that thou art poor. Hold, there is 40 ducats. Let me have a dram of poison, such soon speeding gear, as will disperse itself through all the veins, that the life-weary taker may fall dead. So Romeo's asking for this poison he knows that is illegal, but this apothecary is so poor, he's like, come on now. I said a dram of it, so it's like basically a little vial of it. And that the trunk may be discharged of breath as violently and as hathily powder fired, doth hurry from that fatal cannon's womb. So basically he's being metaphoric and so on, but at the end of the day, he knows that he wants this drug that's willing to kill quickly. Apothecary says, such mortal drugs I have, but Mantua's law is death to any that utters them. So apothecary here is showing he realizes that if he sells him this drug, that's death. That's the death penalty right there. So then Romeo's like, well, let's see here. Here, Romeo, art thou so bare and full of wretchedness and that fearest to die? He's like, well, basically, you look like you're dying anyway. And so, like, sell me the dang drugs, basically. Then he says, famine is in thy cheeks. So famine is, a lack of food. So the apothecary is skinny. He looks sickly. It says, famine is in thy cheeks. Need and oppression starveth in thy eyes. So he's like, your eyes are telling me that you're starving, that you're dying. Contempt and beggary hangs upon thy back. So he's like, contempt, like no one likes you, no one wants you anyway, and you're basically like a beggar. It's on your back, man. It's obvious you need money. The world is not thy friend, nor the world's law. The world affords no law to make thee rich. Then be not poor, but break it and take this. So essentially, Romeo is convincing the apothecary to sell him drugs because Romeo's giving him every excuse to say, like, dude, you're dying. You look like death. You need money more than I do. So then apothecary agrees and says, my poverty, but not my will consents. So he basically saying, Romeo, you have a good point there. My poverty, so how poor I am, consents to sell you these drugs, but not my will. So if he had his choice, he wouldn't sell them, but because he's so poor, Romeo convinced him, obviously. He had this nice argument, and apothecary says, fine, I'll sell them to you. Romeo then says, I pay thy poverty and not thy will. So he's saying, like, I'm going to pay the fact that you're poor and not the fact that you don't want to do it. Someone's getting paid with this money I have. And if we go back, he's giving him 40 ducats. So if you look that up, that's a Venetian word. So it's an Italian money. It's essentially like it's this money that, it's pretty much like how we use money today. It's coins that are worth X amount of dollars at that time in history. Anyhow, so at this time, it would be a lot of money, though. 40 ducats is a lot, okay? So even in this time of history. Romeo says, I pay thy poverty and not thy will. Apothecary, put this in any liquid thing you will and drink it off. And if you had the strength of 20 men, it would dispatch you straight. So essentially he's saying, this liquid that I'm going to sell to you, if you put it in any liquid, if you had the strength of 20 men, it would kill you immediately. So basically, that poison is extremely strong. And Romeo says, there is thy gold, worst poison to men's soul. So he goes, so he's giving him money, right? And then Romeo's saying the worst poison of men's soul is money, actually, not the poison you're selling me. So you're not really doing anything bad, apothecary. Doing more murder in this loathsome world. So he's still talking about the idea of this money is actually worse than drugs because it causes murder in the world. Money does. Then these poor compounds that thou mayest not sell. I sell thee poison, thou hast sold me none. So Romeo's flipping it, basically saying, I sold you something, which is money. And so he's trying to justify that this money is the poison, not the poison being the poison. Farewell, buy food and get thyself in flesh. So he's saying, buy yourself some food, man, and make yourself, put some weight on those bones, put some meat on those bones, as they would say. Come, cordial and not poison. Go with me to Juliet's grave, for there must I use thee. So he's saying, come with me, poison. So it's almost like he's personifying the poison, like it's someone to come with him to Juliet's grave. Now I want to go back up here real quick and talk about this real fast. It says so in this part right here, the reason, and when Balthazar came and told him Juliet's dead, here's the problem, and I want to go to it right now. If we come over here to Act 1, this is what we just read. But if we go to Act 2, scroll down a little bit. There's a scene that takes place. And this scene is important. And if we were in regular school, I'd be teaching this explicitly. So basically through Screencastify, let's get it done. So that was the scene we just read. So Romeo bought some poison. He convinced the drug dealer he needed it. But the next scene we find out, so why did Balthazar go there? Well, before Balthazar even got there, this guy, Friar John, was supposed to have gotten there to Romeo first. So the reason, and I talked to a few guys before the session, and essentially This relates to right now, COVID-19, 2020, May 18th. So pay attention. You might ask why. You'll find out. So the next scene, after Romeo buys the poison, here's the next scene. Friar John says, "Holy Franciscan friar brother, ho!" Enter Friar Lawrence. This same should be the voice of Friar John. "Welcome from Mantua. What says Romeo? Or if his mind be writ, give me his letter." So Friar Lawrence is like, okay, you were supposed to have taken this letter to Romeo. Because remember, Friar Lawrence, the plan he gave to Juliet was, I'm going to write this letter. I'm going to send it to Romeo. It's going to explain that you're supposed to look dead for 42 hours. And then Romeo's going to come to the tomb, pick you up, right? Well, when Balthazar shows up in Act 5, Scene 1, on line 34, or when he leaves, I should say, that's when we realize that Romeo never gets this letter. So we're finding out why he never gets the letter. So Friar John says, "Going to find a barefoot brother out, one of our order, to associate me, here in the city visiting the sick, and finding him, the searchers of this town, suspecting that we were both in a house where the infectious pestilence did reign, sealed up the doors and would not let us forth, so that my speed to Mantua, there we stayed." Now, because we're in the No Fear Shakespeare, I want to read this part because it helps for you to understand everything a lot better, or for anyone for that matter. So why didn't he drop the letter off to Romeo in Mantua? Here's why, in regular English. "I went to find another poor friar from our order to accompany me. He was here in the city visiting the sick. When I found him, the town health officials suspected that we were both in a house that had been hit with the plague. In this case today would be the coronavirus. They quarantined the house, sealed up the doors, and refused to let us out. I couldn't go to Mantua because I was stuck there." Friar Lawrence then says, "Then who took my letter to Romeo? I couldn't send it. Here it is." He gives Friar Lawrence a letter. "I couldn't get a messenger to bring it to you either because they were scared of spreading the infection. Unhappy fortune. By my brotherhood, the letter was not just a nice greeting. It was full of very important information. It's very dangerous that it hasn't been sent. Friar John, go and get me an iron crowbar. Bring it straight back to my cell." Friar John then says, "Brother, I'll go and bring it to you." Then Friar says, "Now I must go to the tomb alone. Within 3 hours, Julia will wake up. She'll be very angry with me that Romeo doesn't know what happened. But I'll write again to Mantua, and I'll keep her in my cell until Romeo comes. That poor living corpse, she's shut inside a dead man's tomb." So with that being said, I want to discuss this idea of the quarantine, right? So Romeo doesn't get the letter because Friar John was quarantined, and because there was this plague that was hitting Verona in the country of Italy at that time in history. So if we go back to the Shakespearean part, let's read it real quick. "Going to find a barefoot brother out, one of our order, to associate me, here in the city visiting the sick, and finding him, the searchers of the town, suspecting that we both were in a house where the infectious pestilence did reign, sealed up the doors and would not let us forth, so that my speed to Mantua there would stay." Now, for the last 10 plus years of teaching Romeo and Juliet, if not more, a lot of kids would always say, "Mr. Celadon, no one's going to keep me in my house." Well, for the first time in history, this part really makes sense, doesn't it? Anyhow, so the point is, Friar John was stuck in his home, kind of like we are. And he wasn't able to deliver his letter. So there, I will end.